You're listening to Short Inspirations from Ralph. How do I forgive myself? Part 2. This is clearly stuff from the past, sometimes a long way in the past, that's tripping me up now, that's holding me back, that's making me gun shy. And for some people, it drives them into creating this false or unreal world that they can live in to escape the darkness of what's happened in their lives. This is where substance abuse and addictions and disassociations and even mental illness can come. Reality is just too hard to cope with. But here's the issue, the reality that God has created for you to be in, for you to be your real self. It's the best possible place for you to be. It's a place where hope lives and a future is opened up for you. It's a place where Jeremiah talks about, which is God's plans to prosper you and not harm you, to give you that hope and to give you that future. Perhaps now is a good time to break out of that prison house of the past. There's another thing that I've noticed. Sometimes people can imagine things or even believe things that people from the outside looking in on that person's situation would say, why do they believe that? I watched a recent TV program about a family of 5 children in New Zealand where the parents decades ago, years ago, left them, didn't come back. And these abandoned children had to grow up in foster homes and places where they were ill-treated. And in the program, they interviewed one of the boys in the family who was now a very old man. And he was clearly affected by his life, as you could imagine. But there's one thing that stuck out to me, which was interesting. He blamed himself for many things that had happened. And I found myself thinking, as I was watching this program, no. You don't need to blame yourself for these things that have happened to you. And so this can be a different dimension again to those things that hold us back, that we believe have happened in the past. There's a character in the Bible called King David, and with what he'd done, there was no imagination required. David had pressed the pleasure button, taken another man's wife and disposed of that man in war. Hideous and horrible stuff that if it happened today, it would be absolute global disgrace. In fact, many of the nations around Israel had also found out about this. But to cut a long story short, David was sprung by a prophet who found him out. He then took responsibility and had great remorse. And in 2 Samuel 12 verse 13, David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. Verse 14, but because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. Now that's an interesting scenario. David repented or took responsibility for his sin, but there were still consequences to what he'd done. And so it's possible to be forgiven, but also forgive yourself and still have consequences. If I rob a bank, I can be forgiven, I can forgive myself, but I've still got to pay the price. It's a crime, and I've still got to pay the money back. It's a consequence. But this didn't stop David from pleading with God for his sick child who was going to die. He'd fasted and spent nights lying in sackcloth on the ground, verse 16 says. He wouldn't even get up from the ground, and he wouldn't eat any food with his household, and they became very worried about him, about his state of mind. And then on verse 18 we read that the child died after 7 days. And David's attendants and household were actually afraid to tell him that this had happened because of what he might do to himself. But then something astonishing happened. When David found this out, he got up from the ground, he washed himself, he put on lotions, changed his clothes, went into church, if you like, house of the Lord, and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request, they served him food, and he ate. And his attendants asked him, "Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But now that the child is dead, you get up and eat." He answered this in verse 22, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he won't return to me." In other words, I can't put the clock back. I can't go back in time. I have to move on. Amazing. We're going to follow the steps that we described here in the next few episodes. God bless you.